Everyone of our show starts with, "Are we live?" I think
I'm
we're live.
smiling.
All right, what's up, everybody? We are live. Welcome to the Husk Guys podcast. I am pumped for this one. This is it is April 24th, 9 p.m. And we've got some awesome guests that have graciously joined us on a Wednesday evening. But there is no better place to be on a Wednesday evenings. It is spring game week. We got Husker football on Saturday, and so we got to jump on and talk. And we are super pumped to have Honky and Jim in Minnesota on here. Quick intro. I'm going to kick this off for these guys, but we actually were just talking about this before the show. In 2018, I asked a big question out there to folks. I said, what's the number one Huskers podcast that I should be listening to? And the resounding answer in 2018, which is 6 years ago, was the Go Big Redcast led by Honky himself. That was the beginning of our friendship. That was the first time I'd ever listened to it. We kicked it off, and we've been texting and DMing ever since. Jim in Minnesota has come along, and I promise you guys this: there's not a single Husker fan that listens to or watches or reads more about Husker football than Jim in Minnesota.
The hardest working man in football.
Yeah,
someone's got to do it. Someone's got to do
it. There is nothing gets by this guy. Our DMs are unbelievable. Like, I think I'm on top of something. This guy's 10 times more on top of it. And so as we were kicking this off, and Andrew and I wanted to kick off a spring game, I was like, we got to get these guys back on. We do this probably once or twice a year. And there's no better group to get together to talk about Husker football than these guys. Honky, Jim, thanks for joining us, boys.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate that. And I will tell you too, Dave, and we started off on you and I, our first interaction was not good. I was like, who is this Husk guys? You were going at it with me. And so it wasn't a good kickoff, but it certainly has been great. And
that's really funny. It's funny you say that, because I've had I probably have like 5 or 10 of those, and I realized I was probably like, I think they've set the emotions run so high when you're a Husker fan at all times that we're just losing constantly,
Yeah.
And then someone puts out a tweet, and I'm on Twitter essentially 24/7. So I'm like, you know what? That person is going to get the wrath of me because we just lost our 5th straight game.
That's what happened.
Whoever gets it, but then I'll feel bad, and then I'll send a DM, and then we become friends. I probably made like 20, 25, 30 different friends that way, being like, hey, I'm really, really sorry about that. Yeah. I'm just very emotional.
Dave tweets a lot with his heart and not his brain. And so our mentions get blown up.
Oh my God, sometimes. We just get crushed. We're getting smashed right now, by the way, by Colorado fans and like just ridiculous people right now. So it's the heart comes out aggressively. Usually like on Sundays, I'm sending a lot of DMs on Sundays. Sorry about that. Jim, sorry.
You had one of those with Redcast Rob one time where you texted me and you're like,
"What's this guy?
Come get your boy, okay? Your boy's going off." I was like, I don't know what he said.
I think they're just like, emotions run high because we're losing constantly.
Yeah,
and then and you're like, and anytime somebody puts out a stat I don't like, it's like, it's your fault. What? How can you say something bad about Scott Frost? And like somebody will be like, because he sucks. And like, well, yeah, but I'm not in an objective mindset right now. Anyway, yeah, it is funny. We've got these are some of my favorite friendships, and this is I always, anytime I'm together with Honky, I always thank you for he was one of the guys who pushed me into podcasting. He said, you guys got to get a show going. You got a big audience. We should get it going. So I consider Honky the godfather of Husker podcasts. Grateful for you to have it. And honestly, this is like the most fun part for me, because you just get to talk Husker football for an hour with some good people, good guests, and it's just a ton of fun. So we're gonna kick things off in a second. The first thing is first. Let's see if I can probably can't get the screen share going as soon as we can, but brought to you by our sponsors, which is actually just us, is Pipeline Jerky. And so not really our sponsors, but let's see if we can get that closer. I'm on Pipeline Jerky. Everybody should just go to pipeline-jerky.com. Try some jerky today. We created it. It's an NIL. Look at that. It's right. Honky's a huge supporter. Jim's been a great supporter. Every bag gives a royalty directly back to the offensive line. We created it for the Huskers. We created it for the offensive line to bring back the Huskers to glory. And then also check out huskguysstore.com. We got cool merch. We got the shirts. This is the year. Run the damn ball. All sorts of good stuff. So those are our sponsors. It's just us, So, if you're a real sponsor and you want access to 100,
we turned down Valentino's and Hy-Vee and Runza.
Yeah, and if you're an actual real sponsor out there and you're looking for if you want access to 125,000 Husker fans that we tweet with our hearts for, and we apologize a number of times, hit us up. But yeah, let's talk some Husker football. Let's see if we can get this thing going. Let's see if we can get this thing going. Slideshow. Let's see if we're live. Here we go. Okay. First one. I'm going back here. All right, boys. Here's what we're talking about. Kick this thing off. We got 250 people joining. This is fantastic on a Wednesday night. 255, 256. The thing is blowing up. All right. This is actually not a picture of Honky. I know you guys think it is, but this is a picture of our head coach, Matt Rule. I do recommend everybody should check out the Redcast latest episode where Honky walks through how somebody mistaken him. What was that? You were at Amigos?
Mac and I were at Raising Cane's, and they like it legit got to the point they took a photo with me. So I kind of pointed at the person and everything, but
it legitimately looks like you.
Just sign any autographs? How'd that go?
I have to be on my P's and Q's. I mean, I'm representing Coach Rule when I act like that. So
so I
gotta be nice.
Did you give like a sermon on the mount? Like that this is your moment.
If we die, we die.
We die. So culture-wise, this is one of the things I want to start with because this is something that we talk a lot about. Jim talks a lot about. Honky talks a lot about. Is there's been such a noticeable change, and I want to talk into a few components of this. There's a lot of news this week that, I dove into this, and I ended up tweeting this out, and I can share that in a second too. But we did not have anybody hit the transfer portal. A lot of people are speculating maybe more will come right after the spring game, but not a single one. And if those, I'm sure you've seen it. This has gone viral of Matt Rule's, stump speech. Essentially, it says, "Why would you go anywhere else?" And he goes into depth about, how we have the best fans and the best facilities and a great coaching staff, and it's so well rounded that folks aren't leaving. And I think that's a huge testament to him and the program. And I think the other component of that, and then I'm going to pass it to Jim and Honky to get your guys' take on this. But I thought he was done in, the offseason is our peak time. We are outstanding at the offseason. We build up the momentum, but he's done a great job really like managing the media. He's gone on Bussin' with the Boys. He did like a whole in-depth, he showed Will Compton like the $165 million facilities. He did, he's done a ton of great interviews. He's done a really good job showcasing the program. And I feel like, I guess everybody immediately goes back to like, didn't Frost do a good job? And like, I don't know. It feels like he has done a great job representing. And the result to me is no transfers. And you look at the rest of them, a lot of schools, Colorado's out there. They've got 27 kids in the portal. That's a whole separate thing. But most of the programs have 5, 10, 15 kids that are hitting the portal. We have 0. So, Jim, I'll start with you because I know this is something that you feel very passionately about. What do you think of the no transfer portal component and the fact that Rule is able to maintain this roster the way that he has?
Yeah, I think you go back to last year and start there. He looked at this whole situation, and I think he looked at it and said, how am I going to build a program where people want to be here? And he actually articulated that really well. He said, that's the defense against the portal era, NIL era, is why would someone want to leave here? And so I'm going to build something here that is going to be so good that the thought of leaving it doesn't really come into your mind. And he did that, and now it's just 1 year later, but he even talked about that. Hey, look, I told you I was going to do this. This is what I did. And he, like you said, Dave, he labeled off, or he rattled off all the different things that someone here would not want to leave. And it was foolproof? No, of course not. People are going to leave for other opportunities. It's going to happen. We'll have some transfer after the spring game for sure. But I really like how he laid out his plan, and he's delivered on that. And it doesn't even surprise him. He's like, why? I'm not surprised. I know who's going to leave basically and who's not going to leave. And in so many words, he said that. But I think it's impressive, especially for a first-year coach. Look at Jeff Brown right now at Louisville. Like every day, there's a Louisville player going in the portal, and they were 10-2 last year, something like that. So I'm asking questions like, I'm joking around there, a dumpster fire, but if I was a Louisville fan, I'd be concerned. Like, I don't understand. This is the first year we had a great season. Why is everybody leaving? We were 5-7 last year. Heartbreaking losses that close out the year. All 4 losses, couldn't get to a bowl game. There would be a lot of reasons I would think if I was a player on that team, especially an older player, Honky, that I'd be like, same old stuff, right? But something definitely is different within the fabric of that program that, at least for right now, they don't want to leave, and that's impressive.
What do you think, Honky?
Yeah, I think there's something very old school about Coach Rule in a very modern era. He deals very well with the transfer portal and the NIL and all those things. But at the end of the day, it's how you treat your players, and we're going to develop them. We're going to coach them hard. We're going to do all the things that I would have done if I was coaching 10 years ago or 20 or 30 years ago. And those same things that you do, if you did them well 30 years ago or 20 years ago, if you're getting the right kids, they're not just going to up and leave at every opportunity. And when you sell them the truth, or the closest thing to the truth, then, you know, they're going to stick around even if things don't go well right away on day one. If you sell them on day one that you're all going to be starters, and you know that can't happen. You know, you can't sell 25 guys in the class that you're all going to be starting in a year. If you do, you're going to have guys leaving because you lied to them. And so you got to tell them the truth. You got to. If we're going to be a developmental program, you can't do that if you're constantly starting over from scratch. You know, and I guess that's the one bit of truth I think I've heard from Dion, is that he's never claimed to be a developmental program. Well, they aren't. You can't. You know, it's going to be real hard for them to build anything other than maybe a 1-year success here or there, or a game success here or there. It's going to be really hard when you're constantly churning through guys like that. So this, to me, is a much more sustainable approach. I love what Rhule's doing from you know, he's incorporated so much old school mentality into what they're doing now, from physical practices and so on. I could go on with that. Last year, they were taking green jerseys off quarterbacks. I haven't seen how much they've exactly done that this spring, but I think, you know, for everyone, there's something for every Husker fan to like about what's going on right now.
Andrew, what do you think?
Yeah, I one of the things that's kind of stood out to me too is that, like, I mean, it's hard to think back to prior to the Rhule era and then say, I think that Matt Rhule is going to do better at Nebraska things and Nebraska culture than the last regime did. Like, I wouldn't have.
Great point.
You sometimes think, like, all right, he's going to go a different way in the new era, blah, blah. But, like, he's taken a lot of plays out of Osborne's playbook, and he's trying to get, like, you know, the spring league. It's a new twist, but it's the same idea that Osborne did. He's getting, you know, tons of reps to freshmen. He's getting tons of reps in games. In last fall, he showed he's not he's not scared to play freshmen and everything as well there. And I think that the players are probably getting more playing time, better development, and kind of saying, will I get this somewhere else? And maybe I think that's part of the reason that some of these players are being just a little bit more bought in.
Yeah, I think there's such an element too of his, you know, some of it's maybe unfair to compare him to Frost, but it's just the nature of it because he was the last coach here. But, you know, this is now his fourth shot at it, basically. The thing that keeps standing out to me is his emphasis he's got on family and making his entire family a part of the program. That to me is shows a significant level of maturity, more so than Frost had. And I think it's unfair for Frost because he was younger, but Frost was very my wife's not a part of this program. My kids aren't a part of this program. Once I leave this campus, you don't touch me, you don't go near me, you don't talk to me. Right. It was you know, and that's hard. I don't want to pretend to be him because I imagine it's incredibly stressful to be the most recognizable face. But if you watch some of that behind the scenes stuff, and Jim, I know you watched some of it because I saw some of your tweets, but you know, he's got his wife makes him dinner, twice a week. Rhule's wife is makes him dinner. They built they have an entire condo just for housing with the players. And he said numerous times, I couldn't do that in Carolina, because they're professionals. It's weird and it's different. And I want my wife to be a part of the program. My wife wants to get to know the players. My wife wants to make food for the players. She makes wings for them. She knows every player by name. And that to me is such a stark difference of just the two of them in particular, where Frost's wife, nobody's even seen a picture of her, and she's not a part of it. She's completely distant. And this is I've built a condo across the street from the program just so my wife can get more family time and be a motherly figure with the program. I got to feel like that plays some kind of a role. I mean, Jim, I know you saw some of that behind the scenes stuff too. Do you think that plays a role too?
I think so. I think something Andrew said is really, really interesting. You know, he's a very intense person to work for. By all accounts, he's tough. I mean, he's had high expectations for his coaches. We heard a little bit about this last practice where he got on the coaches in front of the players. He's not afraid to go there. In the same vein, though, you saw the behind the scenes, his interactions with Compton, and he's a guy that you could have a beer with, and he's just an awesome dude to hang out with. Showing him his house. He has that versatility, and I think the players love that. And it's interesting too. He's kind of going back to the culture a little bit. Something Andrew said too, I thought was interesting. is that he's taken practice and made practice the culture, the foundation, to where he's telling recruits, I want you to come to practice because I want you to walk away from this experience and take this and then compare and contrast with the other practices, not the games, not the game environment, not the red carpet, the nuts, the bolts, the grit, the blood, the sweat, the culture. I want you to soak it up, and then I want you to compare and contrast. I want you to do that for all the schools that are recruiting you, because I'm confident you're going to walk away from that experience and you're going to say, my God, like this is the place I've got to be. And so I think that's really interesting. And he's really kind of taking the focus a little bit away from the game days, and recruiting is going to be more about, I want you to come spend time with us in the trenches and feel what we feel and see me out there working with the players, working with the coaches. And that's different than anybody we've had before. And he's really smart about how he's marketing that. Like, again, Andrea, you're spot on. Like, he is the more Nebraskan head coach that we've ever seen, really, at this point, right? He's so able to adapt and be able to take the best parts of everything he sees and then even enhance it even more and really sell that. And I think that's been impressive for me. He just gets it. He gets like the details. I was listening to somebody, and they were talking about how even on the freshmen who come into the school, like he's listed out on their like welcome to campus, like if you like Thai food, here's a Thai restaurant. So if you like, Caribbean food, go here, here, and here. Like he wants to make this the easiest assimilation possible. He's thought about all those things, where I think those were all lost or not even considered for previous head coaches because it wasn't even on their radar.
He sells the state and he sells Nebraska better than people that have lived here for decades. And he's talked how cool Omaha is and how that's just 50 miles away. But hey, the Haymarket's really cool, and I'm going to have the condo right downtown. I mean, he's selling this as how many countless times over the years have you heard a recruit that said, "Hey, I landed there and I thought it was going to be in the middle of a cornfield, but boy, it's really in a city and it's really cool." And I think that part of the job, part of being successful as the head coach here is understanding from day one what the fishbowl means. And we always make some assumption that a coach that's been coaching for a long time would understand that, or a coach like Frost who played here would understand that, whatever it is, but that you either embrace that fishbowl or you fight it. And if you fight it, you're going to lose eventually. And it's going to be what takes you down. I mean, Bo, ultimately, if Bo could have handled the fishbowl, he was having some success, but he couldn't handle the fishbowl part. And Rule from day one said, "This is my best selling point. People care. They'll get mad when you lose, but they'll get mad, when you lose anywhere. But they'll still show up here and they care. And I'm going to use that fishbowl to my benefit." And he's done that really well.
Yeah, he had a great spin zone as part of that. Like, why would you go anywhere else? Speech that I'm sure you guys saw of him saying, where else are you going to go that 15 players are getting interviewed every Tuesday? And he's like, do you guys, and that's the fishbowl. It's like, that's insane. You guys know that's insane. That you guys are chomping at the bit to interview the 14th best player on the team. If you want to be the 14th best player anywhere else, they're, in front of 25,000 people, they don't know who your name is. And here you've got just like an army of people that are like, I need to talk to the backup running back just to see where his head's at.
Yeah, it's really amazing. I mean, to Anki's point, like this guy's from New York City. Like I think about the commercial when I was a kid, like Pace pecani sauce, and like New York City. Like this guy's from New York City, and he's come into this community. He lives in a rural community. He goes to Bucks. My buddy ran into him at the bar. Like he was just last year. He was just hanging out, listening to country music. He looked over and he's like, "Oh my God, it's Matt Rule." And he was just nodding his head, and jamming out by himself. It's amazing how he's integrated himself so fast into the culture of the state.
I want to dive into one more tangible example that I found this is from the USA Today article, which they're so desperate to pin like Nebraska versus Colorado. I don't know if did you guys see this article, the USA Today article? It was basically
about it.
So it's not worth reading because USA Today stinks. But the whole thing was basically how it was basically how. The fake news.
I mean, they're okay. It was just the most random choice.
The article is like, it's Deion versus Matt Rule, which makes no sense because it's like, you guys, we're in different conferences, nobody's talking about it. But it is interesting because they are two dramatically different things. Deion is very out there saying, I don't do home visits. And I went down this like crazy rabbit hole talking about it, where he was basically like, I don't do home visits because I'm like a celebrity, and if I come to your town, it's going to make waves and everybody's going to know about it. And if I don't come to your high school, like other people are going to be upset and all this stuff. And so I just don't do home visits at all. He makes 0 home visits, 0, none, zilch, and he's proud of it.
Them so badly.
And he's proud of it, right? He's very like, I'm a celebrity. I don't do home visits. They come to me. And this was part of that article. And it said Matt Rule is the opposite. He's like, this is how I was raised. This is how you coach. This is what you do. He's visited 108 high schools, 486 different high school contacts. He's calling coaches every single day. I mean, to me, it's insane because this guy just made $70 million. But to me, it's like it's a tangible thing that like the hunger is still there. But I mean, I think, Jim, and again, coming back to you, just because I know this is an area you feel strongly about, it's an area that Frost didn't quite have, right? He struggled a little bit the local scene. He had some misses with some local high school kids. Do you think we're back on the right footing with this approach? Like the way that he has he seems to just be hustling like crazy. Is he hitting the right notes locally with the right recruits as well as like his national approach on the recruiting side, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, we've talked forever in our previous podcasts and DMs about how we wish this guy did this, or either we wished this happened. And, we got a little bit of that when Mickey Joseph was, the interim head coach, and we saw all of a sudden, like, Metro recruiting was now a focal point where it hadn't been before. We couldn't figure out why previous coaches hadn't do it, but Matt Rule gets it. And he's tapped in. Like Abdul Muhammad is obviously doing some great things at Omaha Central. And Matt Rule is in with him, and he's openly talked to these former Huskers like, hey, look, I mean, my phone lines are open. If you have players that you want to, let me know about, I'm all ears. And by the way, come visit us whenever you want to. He's doing I've always thought this, like, I thought this was like, low hanging fruit 101. Like, why would you not do a football camp in Omaha for the kids? Like, it seemed like a no brainer. He's doing that, not for like high school kids, but like for grade school kids, getting them when they're young and thinking Husker football. And there's a ton of talent there in the Omaha metro area. Of course, you guys know that. So again, it's just another example of him having the foresight and really just the common sense. It really isn't that hard. That's the thing that's frustrating, is like, it shouldn't be that hard. And he's making it super easy now for that to be accessible and something he prioritizes. And certainly, lifeblood recruiting is his lifeblood. You can tell when Compton asked him for his little sales pitch about, how do you recruit me?
Crushed it.
The guy's, he's dynamic.
I was ready to commit.
And you also notice that we kind of saw this first with Mike Riley, where Mike Riley personally recruited like Noah Fant. And head coaches are recruiting more star players themselves. Matt Rule is recruiting a ton of players himself. Like, that's on his plate for his work for that day is making these contacts. That shows you how much he cares about and emphasizes recruiting to where it's that important to him. So
yeah. I'll say recruiting's a relationship business, and the coaches clinic, to me, that you don't have to just wait for victories on the field to see wins. I went to every coaches clinic from 2003 to 2019, the last year of Solich all the way to the second year of Frost, and then COVID hit. There was about 800 coaches that were going to the one with Solich in 2003. About 800. That was close to tops in the country. And progressively after that, Callahan to Bo and so on, you'd see those numbers going down. I can remember during Riley, it got down to about 400 coaches. And when Frost got here, I thought that was going to get fixed and turned around, and it really never did. The numbers didn't go back up dramatically. In fact, they kind of tightened down, who all was coming there. I was going there coaching youth football, Elks midget football. I'd have 6-7 teams. I was an AD through some of those years, and there were times where I felt more welcome than others. It was nice a couple weeks ago to see photos of the guys that are coaching at Elks right now with Coach Rule, and he's pointing at them, and he's trying to help guys that are trying to be football coaches. He's trying to help them with their craft, and let's have better players coming out at all levels. And I think getting back up to 800, which is what they did this year, that is a huge sign. That's a huge sign that what they've done with Coach Foley going out all across the state, and what the stat you just showed there with Coach Rule, that it's making in-grounds there. And so they're building those relationships. And then, Jim, to your point about Omaha, I think of the Warren Academy, and we've had Steve on before, and I know Tony Veland goes over there, has been working them from the beginning, and Rule's gone and talked to him, and that's not something that previous coaching staffs, and I can't for the life of me figure out why, but that's something that moving forward, having those kind of relationships, that's what Deion's not doing.
Yeah.
That's what Coach Rule's doing. To me, that's just so much more sustainable. At least here it is.
Yeah, I agree.
Sure,
Yeah, go ahead, Andrew.
Reaching out. I just not to pit Rule against Deion, but how about Shedeur Sanders just putting up an Instagram post for players interested? It's like, hey, this is how we recruit now. I'm in bed and I'm sending a message. Anyone want to come here?
That whole thing is driving me nuts because like Colorado fans are just crushing us. Like anytime I'm like, hey, you guys have. I mean, Jim, I've seen your stuff too, but it's like you have 27 players in the portal. And they're like, well, we beat you. I'm like, well, God, I mean, but it doesn't it's like I can't even point out the obvious to them. You're like, you have 27 players in the transfer portal. Well, they all suck. They're like, nah, Dylan Eldridge is good. I don't know. You're losing starters, but there's so much like Rule versus Deion or whatever. It's just such a stark difference that it's like, God, if you have 0 transfer portal kids and people aren't leaving, they want to stay, and he's recruiting is like crazy. We're getting good players here. Like you got it, just like you're saying, hockey. It's like you're building for the future. But in a lot of this stuff too, it's like I was listening to Mitch Sherman earlier this week. He's always got some good stuff. Friend of the pod, but he hasn't quite like alluded to it. But he's like, I've talked to a ton of the guys about what happened to Frost, and he didn't say it like directly, but was like one of the things was just all of the other non-football stuff is what he struggled with, and that's all the stuff we're talking about. It's like the family, it's the recruiting, it's the off the field, it's the coaches clinic, everything like that. I think he just wanted to be like the offensive coordinator, and I think Rule loves every aspect of all of it, and I think that's what's made him like successful so far. I think he just loves all of it, and I think that really shines through. And that to me is he's, the winning will come, but this aspect of like, I was nervous that he wouldn't be as hungry. But man, if he's visiting, hundreds of kids and doing all these camps, like he's sold me on that stuff. So I'm all in favor of it.
There was
one thing, Dave, with Rule is that, he's coming off a failure. He was this super hot head coach, had built 2 programs and then surprisingly left Baylor. I mean, that was a shock when he left Baylor. And then he failed in Carolina. Ultimately, he failed. There's reasons for that. But I think that is, I wonder how much different he'd be if he hadn't come off that failure. And Trev talked about that. He actually liked that quality when he looked at hiring Matt Rule, because he's hungry. He's hungry to prove himself. He's hungry to learn from the challenges and get back to feeling good and feeling part of that winning culture.
I think it's a great point. I love that as part of his ability to relate to players too. Like I love that he has the NFL, because I think it makes him uniquely suited for NIL. He knows how to talk contracts, valuations, NFL draft grades, like that sort of thing. But he also talks failure, and he talks openly. He was on on the Bussin' podcast who is it? Delani Walker, I think is the other guy's name, was like, why'd you decide to leave the NFL? And he's like, are you kidding me? I got fired. I think like as openly as he's able to be like, I got fired. I failed. I got fired. I failed. But I agree. I think that comes with a certain amount of, it's humbled him. But it's also,
I think one of his powers though, like one of his key attributes is that he's humble, right? So like he's like, I'm calling Kirby Smart, trying to figure out if I can go over there and check out practices and see what they do. Like he doesn't have, he's all about winning. He doesn't care exactly how or who or he's not afraid to go ask for help, and tap into people that are here and get advice from anybody really, and he's just going to absorb that. Like he's watching podcasts on Dan Hurley, right, to see his style. He's watching Deion's podcast from last year, right? He's he's a sponge, and so he's not like the rest of us that are probably a little insecure and not really sure how we should say something. He says whatever he wants. He says, it's going to cost us money for a transfer quarterback. And he's like, coach is calling me like, why'd you say? He's like, because that's the truth.
Yeah.
Like, I think that really it helps, because he doesn't have time to figure out what he didn't say or not say, or should I be guarded here? He just says it, and people can deal with it how they want.
Yeah.
It's good stuff.
Amy,
go ahead.
Amy Just Just was just on she's Lincoln Journal Star. She was just on with Black No Rock, and she was just saying that how surprised people are when she tells them that Nebraska's media coverage is vastly bigger than schools where she was at, LSU. And she was on the New Orleans Saints beat, and she was like, there's like 4 dedicated writers. There's like, it's a zoo.
Yeah.
Comparison.
Yeah.
The media attention. So one thing that like has been impressive with Rule is just like his intentionality of not only handling the media, but creating more content. I mean, he's pulling back the curtain on everything. And part of me is like, don't reveal all these secrets. Like, come on, we're playing poker here. And it's like,
Yeah.
you know, like, what are you doing? You're telling everyone what you're doing. And but the other is just that I think he is extremely open, which is kind of a breath of fresh air. And he will tell players, and he said this in interviews. He says, if you're thinking about going somewhere else, go watch a practice. Go and see, how do they practice? How do they really do it? How do things go down there? And then what he's doing is now we've got documentaries being made in the season, out of the season, that are showing players, this is how we practice. This is how it, like, this is Nebraska football. This is our culture. So I just think, like, tying it all together, the recruiting is ticking up and the interest is ticking up because of the exposure that we're kind of creating for ourselves. But he's not being shy about like what he wants this place to be.
Yeah, and I think what Craig has just said is flashing on the screen, commenting again. Thanks to for everybody who joined. We got 850 joining us live right now. This is a ton of fun on a Wednesday night. But I think a lot of people share this. You know, maybe Matt Rule wasn't our first choice, but when he visited almost every high school in Nebraska, you know, he's won us over. And that to me is what I agree. I agree, Andrew. He's putting the playbook out there, but he's also sort of like daring people to be like, hey, you want to know what the answer is? The answer is you need to go to every school in your state.
You need to work.
And, you know, well, and what's Deion say? What's Deion say? I'm not doing that. Right? I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
I'm not doing that. And maybe the other guys are doing it, but you know, it's like that to me is like, you can't replace like true hard work and being like, you know, hey, I'm here, I'm grinding, I'm going to every high school. This is what we're doing. But anyway, so hey, he's crushing it. But now we got 3 days out, 3 days until kickoff, boys. So we got to transition.
Now we got to win.
We got 850. We got 850 joining us live, folks. Shout out to the 850 that are here, up to 860. We're crushing it. Let me pop this back up. Okay, let's talk Husker football. Let's talk players. We're going personnel now. We're shifting into this thing. I started going deep on this this week, and so now I want to get your guys' perspective. But I was going deep on experience, and some of this goes directly back to how Rule has been able to retain basically everybody. A lot of these guys are Frost's guys, and he's been able to keep them. A lot of guys aren't transferring, but age to me is important in this age of like transfer portal, everybody leaving, everybody going. And I like in particular on our defense, and some of it's on our offense too, which we'll get to, how we've gotten old. We've got experience all over the place. We've got, you know, we're anchored by 2 seniors in Ty Robinson and Nash. You know, you've got Tommy Hill, Javen Wright, Deshaun Singleton, Bullock, like all of these seniors coming back and anchoring the D. You've got on the offensive side, I don't think I have it shared here, but on the offensive side, the entire offensive line, all 5 starters that are going to come back have started at least 30 games. And so you've got this seniority that I think is coming around so that as we go into the spring game, you know, all eyes are on Dylan Raiola and how young he is. But he's surrounded by some older guys in the Big Ten that I think can help to lead the team in addition to Rule. Curious your guys' take. Do you think, I mean, am I overthinking the age thing? Do you think that's important, as important as I think it is, to have like an older team that's been playing together for a long time?
Jamie, I think it's crucial.
Go ahead, Hockey.
Hockey first.
I think it's crucial, especially in the Big Ten and in the trenches. And that was, you know, even the former AD when he went to bring in Rule, that was a point of emphasis back then, was how we're going to have to win the trenches. We got to get good in the trenches, and you do that by getting old. You look at the list here, and you have a couple seniors there with Robinson and Hutmacher right in the middle of the D line. And when you look at that offensive line, you guys are with Pipeline, Benhart and Scott Prohaska and Corcoran. Those are guys, those are names that have been around for a long time. That's important if we're going to get good in the trenches. that you got some guys that have played. If we're not good in the trenches next year, I've got bad news. I don't know when we're going to get good in the trenches, because these are guys that have gone through the program for a long time. They've now been coached, multiple years by these guys. We think of Raiola as the player, but Raiola the coach. He's third year now with these guys. So I'm expecting us to be, really salty on both sides of the line. It should be physical, and we saw what the defense did last year in year one with Tony White. I have no reason to expect any kind of drop off in year two when you have so many of these guys coming back.
Yeah, just one thing to add to that, and that's a great point, Honky. That's kind of the old adjective that I don't know if it was rule, but get old and stay old. And you see it a lot in the NCAA basketball tournament with some of these fringe teams that have seniors, and they've been together for a long time and they have relationships. The one thing I'll say too is interesting is, we've got some great seniors, but if you remember back to the game against Minnesota, the first game of the season. By that first quarter, Tony White had played 22 players already, and that was intentional. And so, he's not only building a huge roster. I mean, the 85 scholarship doesn't matter to Matt Rule because of the NAL opportunities and things that you guys are doing, with Pipeline Jerky and the other guys are doing. So he's building this massive roster, but he's also getting people a ton of experience. And so you have these people that mature and graduate or older in the program, but you also have guys that are getting a ton of reps. And so I think for us, it's not as maybe huge as maybe we would think before, but because those guys get so much reps. I mean, I was looking up in that first game of the first quarter of the Minnesota game, like, why is that guy in the game? Like, is someone hurt? Like, what is going on? But that's their process.
Yeah,
and that's
Honky, I just wanted to flash this up there too, that for those who aren't actually watching, though, we've got Ben Hart's got 41 starts, Ben Scott 39 starts, Turner Corcoran 30 starts, Prohaska 18, Lutovsky 26, Fedoni's started a full season, is now healthy. So that you talk about trenches front and back on with Nash and Polk, Nash on the D side and Ty Robinson, and then these guys on the other side. It's like you've got some seniors with a ton of experience,
and that goes back to. We're playing new school football in today's age, but we're doing it with some very old school techniques. I mean, what Rule is doing, and you look at Lutovsky there, 26 games played. That looks very much Milt Tenneper used to play 6-7 guys, and it was very by intention. We're going to get this guy on the field. It's well known back in '97 that Frost got booed against UCF. But more to the point was that Osborne, before the game even started, already came out and said, we're going to play Frankie London in the second quarter. We're going to intention. It's not happenstance. We don't just, someone goes in there. No, we're planning for this. We're going to get a lot of guys played, just like we're going to be very intentional in practice with how we do these different circuits so that we get multiple guys. No one's standing around. We're always going to be given snaps, because these guys are going to get out there on the field. And so you create your own depth there too. You don't just wait for injuries to happen. And so I think Jim's point there on defense, by the end of the season, we had injuries. We had bad things that happened on defense, as like any team would have throughout the year, but you have guys playing. I remember right away, Riley Van Poppel out there on the field in the first game. Oh, that's a true freshman. Should he be out there? And then there he is against Illinois, and he's making, the play of the game, keeping them out of the end zone. It's like, okay, well, that's developmental football.
So with all of this now, it's almost like, as I was, looking into this, I was like, gosh, we've got a ton of guys. I've watched these guys play almost for the last 3-4 seasons. As you look at the spring game on Saturday, what are you looking for? Like, what do you think? I think all eyes are going to be on Raiola, and I'm going to be watching the heck out of that. And hopefully I get some stuff.
I'm going to cry.
On repeat. I get some stuff on repeat all season.
When he throws his first deep ball, I'm going to cry.
I tweeted that. I sent that tweet out last night. I was like,
I'll cry.
I was just sitting there. I was like, just give me one bomb. Just throw it like one. It doesn't even have to be a completion, but just throw one 80-yard bomb, and it could just be in the stands. And just be like, I'll just watch that on repeat all season. But so all eyes are going to be on Raiola. But what do you guys think? What else are you paying close attention to, and what do you think we'll be seeing on Saturday?
I'm keeping an eye on Harburg, and the reason why is for a couple of reasons: developmental program and Glenn Thomas. And we've seen what Harburg looked like a year ago, good and bad. It's not going to be the exact same offense. I think they'll, obviously we're a year more involved in the offense, but I want to see some development out of him. You know, if he looks like he's if he looks like a capable starting quarterback, then that's already think back to the Michigan State game and just throwing it kind of into space, you know, when the guy's wide open. Think back to the first play or first drive of Northwestern where you're overthrowing guys that the play is there, the call is there, but the execution wasn't. So Haarberg is a good example of if that execution is there, then you're sitting there going, well, geez, wait a second. We've got a guy with 8 games of experience that we have a new coach come in that's working with him. And now we're seeing the fruits of that he looks better. Now, if he's still throwing it all over the place, then, you know, we have other options now, and options I know are going to be a lot of interest in the stands. But Haarberg's a guy I want to watch.
Yeah, that's a good call.
It's a great call because I think we're kind of a little bit nervous. Like, do we need a backup quarterback in the portal? Like, are we really comfortable to go in the season with Haarberg at number 2? And so that's a great point, Honky. We have to feel good about that. And it's kind of funny because remember the spring game, Haarberg's first spring game, it was like 40-mile-an-hour winds, and he actually looked really good. I was like, okay, this guy is going to be pretty dang good. So you kind of hope that it's there, and by all accounts, he's been playing well. So I think for me, the one thing I really worry about on offense is that we have been such a quarterback run heavy team for so long, going back to 2018. You know, last year Haarberg led our team in rushing, and I'm excited, of course, about Raiola. But I have to be able to see the actual, you know, running backs take that baton from the quarterbacks and be able to produce, you know, yards on the ground. And because the reality is we're not going to run Raiola, so where's those yards going to come from? Yeah. And you know, the last game of the season, again, I'm granted it against a fantastic defense in Iowa. We could not run the ball. I mean, we cannot run the ball at all,
right? And
struggle to do that from a running back standpoint. So, you know, I hope they go live, so, just like Michigan did in their spring game, and not like Ohio State did in there, so we can actually see and kind of feel good about these running backs. And because I do, that's my concern. You know, how are we going to produce yards on the ground without a quarterback run game? I haven't seen it yet for a long time in this program, right?
Yeah.
I can't remember back to Tanner Lee, right? I mean. Really?
I think that point, Jim, about going live as much as you possibly can, as much as makes sense, is that, you know, it's a benefit of having 95 or 105 or wherever we're at right now with our numbers, plus, you know, plus our walk-on count, is that we've got some numbers and it's a risk, but I'll always say it's the same thing with the green jerseys. I've been saying forever with the quarterbacks, especially when you have a competition going on. And when somebody isn't just the clear cut, you know, and I'm saying that even with Raiola right now. And some people will roll their eyes and they're like, of course he's the starter, but he hasn't yet. And right now, the best way you're going to get to being a starting quarterback at this level is you've got to play football at this level, at the speed of this level. And he may be a 5-star and all these different things, but he has not played college football with the speed of the game around him. And waiting till August or September for him to see it for the first time seems like a wasted opportunity. I don't think Coach Rhule is going to do that. I think he's probably there's a lot of things we haven't got to see on social that I'm sure they've been doing in practice, but you got to get them up to speed, literally up to speed of this game, and there's only one way you can do that.
Yeah, Andrew, what do you think? What are you looking for on Saturday?
I mean, Saturday it's just a great day to shake the rust off altogether. I mean, like Der Wiener Schlinger, what's he been doing all off season? You know, like, how's he going to come out looking? Is he going press boxes on the first shot, or is he going to play it safe and
over South Stadium?
Just hit a little dinker.
He's been working out.
You know, we got to think about everybody else here. No, I think it honestly, I'm just excited for football in Lincoln. That's my cop-out answer. Like hearing about the tailgates, hearing about the shops, seeing how many fans are there, just watching football on TV in Memorial that gets me going. But on offense, I'd break it down to offense and defense and special teams. But offense, I do want to see something out of our running backs. I think there's definitely talk about Dowdle. Bourbon, we know what he can do when healthy. Ramir, we know what he can do when healthy. And Emmett Johnson's making a push now too. But I don't think we've totally heard like who's the dude. You know, who's the guy? Who's gonna be the bell cow if you need one. I know Rule wants to cap him around 25 carries, but who's going to be the guy that takes 25 carries? And so I'm interested to see that battle on the offensive side, and then on the defensive side, I think it's probably got to be I'm between linebackers and D-backs. Hill, I'm interested to watch opposite Tommy Hill, the Hill brothers. And then I just think that's probably it's going to be an interesting battle. Freshman quarterbacks versus, pretty solid defense, but the defensive backs, that if you had to pick one area, that the defense struggled at times last was against passing game. So we'll see if Rayola can pick them apart or who wins that battle.
Yeah, let's dive into a couple of these. So the running backs one, and we had talked about this on a previous show, but curious to bring it back up. We had asked the fans, who do you think is going to lead the team in rushes? And I think we talked about this before, but everybody loves the new guy, and so you can see the fans with 46% on Dowdell or Dowdell. I don't know if you pronounce it that way, but so they're everybody goes for the new guy. But you've got Emmett Johnson there, who it seems like if you listen to the press conferences, and again, Jim, you listen to everything much closer than me, but it seems like they're leaning closer to Emmett Johnson, but also saying Gabe Ervin's like our guy if he's healthy. Do you have a similar read? Like, if I were to read the press conference, it's like Emmett Johnson number 1, Gabe Ervin 2, Dowdell it's clearly there somewhere, but probably isn't like the bell cow guy. What do you think they're leaning towards?
Yeah, it sounds like Emmett Johnson is the guy. I mean, he's really transformed his body. By all accounts, he came in really, really small, and that was the one thing, big concern. But here's the thing with Emmett Johnson that we keep forgetting, I think, is think back and who were the last great running backs at Nebraska that we can talk about?
I mean, Rex Burkhead. Like, is there?
Yeah, Rex and Amir, right? Rex and Amir, and even 2 other guys that played well other places, in Braylon Hurd and Aaron Green at TCU and Kentucky.
Damn. You're digging the archives. It's good.
Yeah, but I'm going with this. Who recruited those guys and who coached those guys? Ron Brown. Who recruited and offered Emmett Johnson? Ron Brown.
Did he?
So remember when Ryan Held was let go, Ron Brown was the interim, and Ron Brown immediately went after and got approval from Frost to offer Emmett Johnson, who, by the way, is from Minneapolis, Minnesota, and us offering Emmett shocked the Minnesota staff. No one was offering Emmett Johnson, no Power 5 teams. So I think he's in running back 1. Gabe Ervin, I just don't know. I mean, last time we saw him, he was running really well against Colorado. I mean, he was really starting to pick up yards, and then all of a sudden Jeff Sims fumbled, and that was the end of the game. But can he recover from a devastating hip injury?
Yeah,
I don't know, man. I don't see it. And Dowdell, you're right. Like, he hasn't carried the ball very often. And Rule's talking about this. Like, it's more than just running the ball. You've got to be able to do pass protection. You got to know there's so much involved with being a running back that can be on the field for 3 downs. So, I'm kind of in that camp, guys. I'll be honest with you that I'm a little concerned about the running backs. Maybe because we just haven't seen anybody actually do it over a long period of time. And Ramir Johnson, we don't talk about him, but he had a great season in 2022 before he got hurt. So yeah, I feel okay, but I think we'll probably feel better in the fall.
we got this comment coming on Dylan Edwards. And I'll ask it more as a broader question of 1, do we go for Dylan Edwards? 2, do we need a transfer guy? 3, do we think we have the guy here? Open-ended or like
we're definitely going after him. We know that. We had a relationship with him prior with Frost and Bill Bush. I think he's going to Kansas State. It feels like that's a great spot for him. But is he an every down back? That's, I guess, my question. But he's a guy who's a game breaker, right? He's got a skill set that we don't have right now. And I think Rule's looking at it that way and saying, can I add talent to my team to make us better? And he's the guy that makes your team better. Absolutely.
Honky, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm a huge Emmett Johnson fan. I mean, I thought the second half of last season, I thought he looked as good of a back as we've had a number of years. It just, he didn't get the number of carries that I think you need from him. But his development here this offseason is going to be key. I definitely see him being a major part of this. Gabe, there's just the injury issue just is such a concern. It was a concern coming into last season before he had the hip. So Dowdle, we'll see. I mean, this is a big guy. We already got our big name, transfer, so to speak, of the offseason just by getting him. But look, if you can get a talented kid to come in here after the spring, that's cool too. I'll just say, not when I think of the developmental program, it's really hard for me seeing us doing a lot of work in the portal after the spring. I think that's such a big point for what Rule wants to do is get these kids in here in December and in January and get them through this whole offseason. That's not to say last year, Tyler Knack, he brought in from Utah. That was the one guy after spring. But I think, he's not going to play a lot in that space unless there's really a serious issue. So I guess now a kid like Edwards might be a little bit different just because of the absolute talent there with him and some of the history with this place. But if we were hitting a spot hard after spring, that would be a sign that they really didn't think something was strong in spring.
Yeah, I like what you're saying there too, and I think that was always a concern to me. It was always seemed to be an area with Frost where it was like, all we need is to get O'Shawn Mathis, and then we're going to be a great team because we just don't have any. We don't have any defensive ends. It's like, well, why don't we have any defensive ends? It's just like,
well,
it's a great point of like, wait, we should have the guys here. Why do we not like? Why is it May?
And O'Shawn's a great example of that. Because of, they wanted to let him graduate at TCU. So now that keeps him there until the end of May. And he'll kind of trickle in here in the middle of June after a few weeks of summer stuff. And it's like, and then that one year, I think we had like the D lineman from Texas Tech got here in August. And it's like, okay, is this just like show up and play? Because you got to be here for a while. You got to earn your stripes and everything. And we were 6 games into the season with O'Shawn before we knew how. Well, it wasn't until Bill Bush became D coordinator that we seemed to even know what we wanted to do with him.
Yeah,
and that was your number one guy that offseason. That was the number one portal player. So just getting a guy highly rated doesn't do anything either if you don't know how you're going to use him or if they still have to acclimate here. All these things still have to happen. So I think that's what a little bit of time takes. But I'm run the damn ball guy and I love talking running backs, but I think as we talk about getting old, I'll even bring up the receivers. I mean, Banks and Nair, what they add potentially to that, well, not just potentially, Banks for sure, to that wide receiver room. When you have Bullock coming back from, who brings some experience there, I keep forgetting that IGC is still there because he's, had such a strange 2 seasons. But you have some experience in that room. Then as you're bringing up Lloyd and Coleman and Doss, and that's an interesting room now. That can be that can add a lot to our run game if we have those guys out there that can actually stretch the defense and make them have to really play them. And somebody was saying earlier about how our DBs were struggling at times too. Hopefully our DBs, if they're practicing up against these receivers that have a guy like Banks, if you can go one-on-one against Banks and have some success, you're probably going to be pretty confident whoever you're going up against on Saturday.
Jamie, thanks for listening.
Jamie's going to bed, guys.
Good bed. Jamie's going to bed. Appreciate you, buddy. Hey,
great point.
This is just met you, and I really like you.
This is a great transition to wide receivers. We got 1,000 folks on the phone. We just lost Jamie, but we still have 1,050 live. But a similar question: Who's going to finish the season with the most receptions? But we can talk broadly, a little bit more broadly about the wide receiver room. And I heard this a few times. I forget who exactly said it, but it was basically like every offseason I go into the season thinking like, someone else talking about like I go into the season thinking we've got a really solid group of wide receivers, and I think this year's no different. We've had Omar Mannings of years past, like Trey Palmer actually lived up to the hype, but most of these guys, you always go into the offseason and you're like, oh, we got these guys, and I think this year's very similar. You got Banks and Nair and Coleman, Lloyd. But what do you guys think of the wide receivers room? Answer this question too. Who's going to be the go-to guy? But also, what do you think of the depth and our ability to pass? Like, how do you think that's going to go? Andrew, you could start with you.
This is the deepest receiver room we've had in like what feels like my lifetime. It is that's not true, but it's incredible what has transpired between October and now. Like between October when we remember when Washington went down with an ACL and it was like this reaction of just like staring at the TV in silence, just like, yep, there goes another one. And it was just so heartbreaking. But here's what happened. Everybody behind them, I mean, so we were starting and Kemp was point as well. Like at IGC was hurt. So now you're starting your 4th, 5th, 6th guys. All of them are now experienced. Mal Coleman, Jalen Lloyd. Like, where would we be without that happening? You get Demetrius Bell that's coming in hot. Same with Jaden Doss. Ja'Cory Barney's getting talked up very widely. Obviously, we added Banks. We added Nair. IGC comes back again. And then you got the other pretty studly recruits, Davon Hall and Isaiah McMorris. I mean, it's a lot of people that are competing for spots that I feel like last year we could probably go 4 or 5 deep and feel pretty solid until the top 3 get injured. And then now, like, gosh, it's 10, right? I mean, there's a solid 10 there that even though they're young, they're capable. I think Banks is going to be the guy that down. He had the most targets in the country last year without a drop, and that's got to say something. We've struggled with drops before, and he's going to be old reliable for Dylan Raiola, I think. And then Nair gives you a nice threat over the top, and then I think everybody else is a very complimentary role. Mal Coleman the sky is the limit, and then Jalen Lloyd I think is going to go off. And Demetrius Bell is my dark horse as like the guy that kind of, I'm honestly actually not sure where he's going to end up playing, but that's where I'm at as my top 5.
Jim, what do you think of the wide receiver room?
I think it's good. I do think aside from Banks, he's the one proven guy. That's the one guy that we saw actually produce at a high level and do it consistently. And so I think after that, there's a lot of potential for sure. We just have to see it, right? And I think Jalen Lloyd's the next guy up, and by all accounts, he's having a fantastic camp. And we're hoping with Nair, right? We don't want to go there yet because he's coming off, 2 seasons where one he was hurt and one he didn't play a lot. But you turned that tape on of Wyoming, and I saw that guy play, live in a couple games 3 years ago. I mean, his talent is ridiculous. And so you kind of just, if you allow your mind to go there for a second, you're like, man, if Nair's at full strength and he is running down the sideline and Jamal Banks has got the middle of the field, then you have a guy who runs a 3.7 40 or whatever Lloyd runs. And then you have a guy who can throw it 80 yards for Andrew. I mean, it's easy to go, wow, that's an impressive looking, and you have Fidone who's getting healthy.
Yeah,
and it looks really good.
Mention our tight
it
end
has to
room.
come together.
Yeah, I think Lloyd. They just had the question about is Lloyd the fastest? And I think Jim, you had posted a video from a few years ago of Lloyd, Coleman, and then Genatoni. Yeah. Is that the guy?
I was just gonna say,
like the North Black kid, that
3 fastest kids in Nebraska now.
Yeah, went to Montana. Now he transferred back after 2 years. So homegrown Huskers there. But Lloyd, it gets back to the developmental part of the game. A lot of people a year ago, Lloyd was he was a project. This is a guy. He won't do much in year 1, but give him 2 or 3 years, and then he'll be a good player for us. And it's like, well, holy smokes, we're talking about him right now as potentially being a starter, and he came in there right away in year 1 and found a niche and did his thing. And so when you think of a guy like Davon Hall, who comes in with a lot more hype, a lot more press right away on day 1. Now, I don't know if Hall's going to be a starter next year, or if he doesn't play much or whatever. We'll see. But I wouldn't throw anyone out at this point. But I think that the history that we've had with Torrey and Palmer and Kemp and now Banks, a transfer can come in here and certainly be the starter and be the number 1 guy. Fidone's the one that I do like to hit on, though, is just him. I almost, I don't want people to forget what it was like for him for 2 straight seasons and these 2 season-ending horrible injuries. And I remember after that Minnesota game, the first game of the year, and he didn't catch anything. And I think it was some radio guy, one of them maybe in Omaha, or somebody said something along the lines of, "See, I don't really, I don't think this guy's going to be that special." Yep. And I don't know what Fidone's going to end up doing with his career. I have no idea. But I was, I was so upset reading that tweet from that guy because I was like, he made it through a game healthy. I mean, my goodness, that's all I wanted to see. We'll see where he goes from here. I'm not trying to hype him up and say he's going to be an All-American for us next season or anything, but my goodness, he made it through a season. He made through a game healthy, and then he made through the whole season healthy. And I think that's
what, 5 touchdowns last year. I mean, he had a great season, and he could be that's what will be the most interesting. I feel like what's impossible for us to predict is we truly haven't had like a competent quarterback, let alone the number one quarterback in the country. And so he could make any of these guys look like superstars, right? Like that's, you know, I kind of go back to, you know, there's different, I think about different quarterbacks that turn average players into All-Americans, you know, that, and then those guys end up like not going to play. Like Matt Ryan, who just retired. I was just thinking back to his college career. He made a ton of guys look like All-Americans. He turned them into All-Americans, and none of these guys even got drafted in college. And I think Raiola could do something like that if he finds the right guy and if he has guys that are consistent. And like, you know, I just think we just haven't had his level of talent. At least we all think it is. And that to me changes everything of like, if we give him the time, which we've already talked about, we've got experience on the O-line, we've got talent in the wide receiver room. And now we've got, you know, you don't have a, you know, Harburg throwing to you. You've got the number one guy.
Yeah. Well, to your point, I mean, Fidone made a living last year catching balls like this, you know, and and if the ball's thrown here, that can be a whole different ball game for him too. There, and
that's what's keep going.
And that's part of and that was part of my part with Harburg from a development standpoint is Harburg going from here to here in the spring game. That's a big difference there.
I think the jury's still out on Satterfield for me, but I give Satterfield at least one season of benefit of the doubt a little bit, only because when you go watch some of the plays that you go back and watch, a lot of these plays, guys were open. 3-4 guys were wide open on a play.
Yeah.
And like, no, you know, and you're like, oh my God, he's open. Throw it. And like,
and then throw it to the right guy.
Yeah, and then he throws it to, you know, to Bullock, and you're like, for the love of God, are you kidding me? Like, what's going on? So you're like, okay, it appears as though Satterfield can game plan at least a little bit to the point that we can get guys open, you know, and then can Raiola make that throw, and we've got the talent that we just highlighted. So yeah, I mean, you'd like to think
Jim. I think Jim, you focused a lot, Jim, before, like on the operational side of things, you know, and this is year 2, and we all know the kind of the rule bump that comes in year 2. But I think offensively, from a leadership standpoint, when you're hiring Satterfield on day one and his initial position was tight ends coach and offensive coordinator, and that was the intent of him. He was going to be the tight ends coach, but then just through a number of things, we end up having to make him a receivers or a quarterback coach. So now he's having to build the offense. He has to coach the quarterbacks up. You get to the season, he wants to be up in the box. Well, he can't really be in the box. He needs to be on the sideline to talk to those young quarterbacks as they're coming off the field. Operationally, and I'll ask this to Jim, but anybody, I mean, how do you feel right now offensively, knowing that Glenn Thomas is taking care of those quarterbacks? He's going to be on the sideline. Satterfield's going to be up in the box. Those two have been working this offseason to add what they want to the offense. But just operationally, I just think it's going to be so much cleaner.
Yeah, my question is, why didn't he hire Glenn Thomas last year?
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like when he couldn't get Jack Peets, it's like, well, then pivot to your next guy who's been with you. But no, to answer your question, I think they learned a lot, right? Rule's a guy that he learns a ton from the mistakes. And, you know, last year there's a lot of mistakes. Some of it was their doing. You know, with Jeff Sims and with Harburg, I mean, that's just, and then obviously Purdy, but they've learned from that. And I think that you're right, Honky. I mean, there was times last year when Matt Rule was coaching the quarterbacks during a game because there was no one to do that, you know, and now you have a dedicated person to do that. You know, where he's going to be he's going to be, you know, up in the press box calling plays. I still think that Glenn Thomas is going to be more involved in the offense than they're letting on. It sounds like the offense they're doing right now is quite a bit of some new install. There's a base formation is the same, but we're not going to see things we didn't see. They're not going to run the option anymore. I mean, that stuff's going to be gone. You're going to get a lot of, you know, the 49ers looks. You're going to get a lot of that stuff that we wanted to see last year. So I think they went from just, hey, we'll figure it out, we'll figure it out, and then we'll have a great defense, and we'll figure out an offense, to saying, well, we've got a great defense, and now we're going to do this, this, and this on offense, and we've got a guy who can do that. So we'll see.
Yeah. We are going to have 4 receivers with 800 yards, maybe 1,000 each. It's just going to be an absolute. It's just going to be mayhem. It's going to be mayhem, Ken. Mayhem. And we're going to have 2,000-yard rushers, including Dylan Raiola is going to rush for 1,000 and throw for 6.
Yeah.
Here's my question though. Here's my question. What if, like, and I was there when Martinez had his first spring game, and it was just like, oh my gosh, this guy's the real deal. Like,
the future.
Wow, like this. Yeah, we are set, boys. What happens if Raiola just goes off? Like,
oh my god,
let's just I mean, I know Andrew's gonna cry, but like, literally, like, what happens if that goes off? I mean, and he's just shredded.
You're gonna get pretty tired of Husk guys, is what's gonna happen.
Yeah, we're probably gonna go the opposite direction. It's like,
we're gonna have a big summer.
Well, because they've done a really good job. I think it was Honky was saying they've done a really good job of really kind of controlling the hype. And the first time they really showed anything, that was that video clip of last Saturday, and they put it out there. Like, we had read about those 2 plays that he made, but then actually see it, and they weren't afraid to put it out there, which tells me something. Like, that tells me that they're okay with kind of taking off the veil, because come Saturday, guess what? We're all going to see it, right? And
well, I think what's interesting, and I've heard a few different local guys talk about this. It's actually been the season has not been very hyped, or this off season, as far as like the spring game.
You're right.
It's been pretty slow. When you think comprehensively about like the last 5-10 years, there's been a ton of distraction, right? Like, we've been talking a ton about basketball. We talked more about basketball this off season ever. We've talked, Trev he sucked the energy out of us for 2 to 3 weeks entirely, right? Almost entirely. You've got Trev, you've got basketball, you've got, women's basketball with Caitlin Clark is like taking off the women's hoops. We had volleyball. We had all sorts of stuff happening that I actually, even in doing research for the show, I was like, God, where's the spring game preview stuff? Like, people were kind of late to it. Mm-hmm. So I do think that, Jim, is now, like, a lot of that stuff's kind of behind us. And I actually don't think it's been hyped up. Like, it's been completely hyped. Like, everybody knows Raiola, but if he goes off and he's like ESPN level hype, that to me is like that, kind of like that would blow the actual like roof off this thing. It's like totally different.
I'll throw one caveat out, and it's probably it's a Honky caveat. It's not going to be a Husker Nation one, but if he goes off, it's all about if he goes off in real football or does he go off in touch football? And there's a big difference there. And so it's going to be how. I mean, I still want to see good throws and I still want to see good plays and everything. But I go back to the 2005 coaches clinic and watching the 200 play. It's the highlight of the Callahan era, but the 200 play scrimmage where Zach Taylor, an unknown Zach Taylor, won the position away from Joe Daly. And Joe Daly looked great in warm-ups, and he always did a great job throwing the ball in 7-on-7s and all that. But they took the jerseys off and they let these quarterbacks compete, had a real competition. And there was nothing crazy impressive. There was no ESPN, fireworks, and you didn't know that Zach Taylor was going to be an offensive player of the year for the Big 12. But you could see a difference between him and Daly in that setting. Mm-hmm. And so I don't necessarily have illusions that we're going to take green jerseys off and we're going to see huge hits on any of the quarterbacks. But I do think if they did do that, that would give you the best impression of who the best QB is. Yeah. That's most important to me is, can I walk out of that really feeling who's the best guy playing football? And then to that point, if I saw that and I saw Raiola make a couple of plays, that it doesn't have to be anything crazy. A couple of really good plays. That one throw you really want to see him make to Banks or Coleman down the field or Lloyd or something. Who isn't going to go nuts for that? I mean, I'm not rooting for any one player. I'm very clear about that. I'm not rooting for this guy to be a starter. I don't really care right now. I'm just rooting for the best guy to be the starter. Yeah. But I'm not naive enough to think if it was Raiola and if he really goes out there and performs high level playing real football, this place is going to be nuts.
Oh, it's gonna be nuts. But I think they've done a good job. And if you are following the cycles, they're hyping up, Danny Kaelin pretty good.
Yep.
And intentionally, you can tell it's very intentional. You can tell it's kind of manufactured a little bit. And they're talking a lot about him because, and I agree with this. Like, I think they want Rayola to feel a little bit of like, okay, I gotta earn it, right?
Needs to.
And so I think he, it does need to. But if you're him, you're kind of like, I'm starting, right? I'm not. This isn't Georgia.
Oh,
I'm
I
not,
hope. I mean, I hope he does. I hope he honestly doesn't think that.
But if you're, I mean, realistically, you're the number one recruit in the country. You probably have got a little bit of that. But I like that they've got Harburg.
I'm sure
I
Arch
like
Manning has some of that too, and he's not playing either.
Well,
You just,
totally.
if you're not getting pushed, if you don't feel you're getting pushed, then you're not getting better. He has to internally, at the very least, internally, he has to feel pressure from somebody that if he doesn't. And maybe to the point of like Jeff Sims a year ago, I don't know if he felt that same thing, even though they were taking the green jerseys off. I have no idea. But I think
regardless, I think publicly they're doing a really good job.
I agree.
Being like, hey, Danny Dimes is throwing some bullets, and I think he's a really good quarterback too. I don't think he's anywhere near the ceiling that Rayola's got, but he's a good player. Harburg's a good player. Like, and I hope they make it. And I hope they make it tough.
I think you hit on it, and Jim and you guys, you were hitting on it perfectly at the beginning too when you talked about the culture. The culture was that you're going to earn everything and all that. Think of how they recruited Kaelin a year ago. That takes an outstanding job by a coaching staff to let him go to Missouri, and then still be able to pull him back after Rayola goes to Georgia, and then late in the game to have him come in. I know that day I immediately thought Kaelin's gone. And that's a coaching staff that's keeping in touch and saying the right things. And obviously,
it's
so
honesty.
we haven't had, it's honesty. We haven't had a bunch of guys go in the portal.
Well, and I also
Kaelin's here for all that too.
I think if he's smart about it, he's going to play. And that to me is like all of these guys that we're talking about. And you look at if I've learned nothing else, it's that guys get hurt, things happen, bad things happen. You might get hurt, you might get suspended. Like, we've had enough Riker 5 starts for me to know that, like, your backup.
Yeah, and something about
your
Kaelin.
Your backup's going to play.
Leave Riker 5 out.
It's every late November Purdue game. It's no matter who we play, no matter who is playing against Purdue. It's always like you can whenever we play Purdue this year. I guarantee you Danny Kaelin starts. It doesn't matter. It's just like, or somebody. They just always get the backup.
I'm going to push back on Dave a little bit on Danny Kaelin. I think he's actually pretty dang good. I mean, we forget that he's an Elite 11 quarterback. He won the most accurate passer. He was not afraid of competing with Rayola in that camp. By all accounts, this spring, he has elevated his game tremendously. People that have watched him play at Bellevue West for a number of years, watched him play in the spring practices, are like, this guy he's really good.
I mean, it would be insane if he beats him out. That would be insane.
And if you got to think about Danny, like again, Honky's point, like he goes to Missouri. He's been in Rayola's shadow for 3.5 years now. I mean, remember the Friday Night Lights camp where Raiola was throwing around 80-yard bombs as a freshman, and there's Danny in the background, right? His whole career has been in the background. So Raiola leaves to go to Georgia, and Danny's like, finally, and then he recruits like half of our recruiting class. Let's not forget that. I mean, he busted his butt to recruit these guys. He built this class, and then here comes Raiola at the last second. Hey, what's up, guys? All right, I'm back in, right? And he's okay with that. Like, that takes a tremendous amount of character to be able to do that as a 17 age. I mean, I couldn't do that at my age. Like, he's 18 years old. And that kid's a special kid, and I'm looking forward to seeing him play. I've talked about Raiola, kind of like what happens if he goes off, but I'm rooting for Danny Kaelin because I think he's a tremendous player, and I think we need him for sure. I mean, to your point, Dave. I mean, we had 3 quarterbacks play last year. I'm guessing we're gonna have 3 again this year.
Yeah, it's just, every year though. I mean, it's like every single year there's an injury. Adrian got hurt plenty of times. Like. The number of times Taylor Martinez got hurt, Tommy got hurt. Every quarterback we've had has gotten hurt for at least a game. And you always have that, that backup comes in and he plays that mission critical game. Chuba started against Iowa. It's like, it's like how many of these guys you got a third string guy that plays out of his mind against Iowa. So I think they're all going to play. We need them all to be good.
Is we just if our passing game was serviceable last year, it's a bowl team,
Yep.
And
Yeah.
here's
Yeah.
here's a crazy stat. Adrian Martinez, true freshman, came in. I mean, took the reins pretty much right away. 64.6%, 2,617 yards, 17 touchdowns. Last year, 1,631 yards, so 1,000 less passing yards.
It is. What are you
10
talking about last year?
touchdowns. Our
Like,
team.
we had.
Our
oh,
team.
Jesus Christ.
Our team.
We're not talking about last year. This is positive vibes only.
10 touchdowns. That's 7 less touchdowns. 52.1%.
Last year didn't have it.
I mean, just like, so I guess I'm just saying a true freshman coming in that should have as much potential, probably more, should have as many weapons. Like, if you can put that passing performance on the table, I mean, think about the things that are fixed with this offense just right away.
You know, that's a great point, Andrew. You think about this, like, to your point, like, we were 5-7, but we should have been 7-5, if not, you know, better than that, right? They're really, that was not a 5-win team last year, with the worst offense in 50 years in Nebraska's history, right? Think about that, like, since 1968.
Oh,
If you're just a little tiny, like, I hate to say it, if you look at Iowa, right? If you're just a little better offensively, like, with that defense, you're going to, you know, 7-8 wins potentially, and so you don't have to be this big massive jump, you know, in offense production.
7 or 8 wins.
Better than you were last year, which was terrible.
Jim, where do you see 7 or 8 wins? Do you see it at UTEP? That's 1. Colorado, that's 2. Northern Iowa is 3. Illinois is 4. Purdue's 5.
UCLA.
Rutgers 6. Indiana 7. Okay, so there's 7. So we're 7-0 heading into Ohio State. Maybe that's a loss. 7-1. UCLA is 8. USC toss up. Wisconsin 9. Iowa's 10.
Should be a 7-win team.
You should be 7-0.
Yeah.
Did you guys see what just happened?
You know, obviously Nebraska, you know, we've had our losses the last number of years, so you can't look past anyone. But I will say, regardless of all that, you'll never have a better runway right now. Those first 7 games, no matter what our records have been the last 5-10 years, I don't think as the Big Ten gets bigger and we keep bringing more schools in and all that and scheduling changes, you're not going to have a runway like that. So I tend to be a guy that says, hey, I value experience over youth, especially at quarterback right away. Tommy Frazier didn't start till his 5th or 6th game. But if you were ever going to start a true freshman, ever, I would say this is about the best runway you're going to have for your first
with a lot of protection. A lot.
Well, I think that's the thing is it's not you're not starting to you're not starting a true freshman with a freshman O-line. You're trying.
And we're not starting on the road. Yeah, we're not starting on the road at Minnesota, at Colorado, at Ohio State, at
Ireland for God's
sake. First time since 2019.
4 straight home games. You've got UTEP and Colorado, Northern Iowa, and Illinois all come in. Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, 4 straight home games helps a ton. But I do think having that experience on the offensive line, I think I've got, you know, probably irrational confidence in Tony White now. I just think that guy's a wizard with what he did last year. But if you've got a defense that keeps you in the games the way that they did, plus the offensive firepower that we've now added, and you're saying, we can't look past anybody. Any of these teams could beat us. We could be certainly 0-7. But like, man, you look at that schedule, it doesn't have exactly like you're saying. It doesn't have the Minnesota up front. It doesn't have an Ohio State or a Michigan up there in those first 4 or 5 games. But yeah, it's certainly a schedule that like it's favorable, especially for a freshman QB, it'll hopefully like get some rounds in. But yeah, the Colorado game ends up being, again, it's like that thing just derailed the heck out of our season last year. Just from what happened? Like I still don't really understand what happened.
We need to be, and I think this is 100% realistic. We need to be 4-0 when we're going to Purdue. That is so crucial to have that kind of start in September. And to defend home and all those things. I mean, those are 4 games. They're just that to me. They're must wins. You got to be 4-0 when you're going on the road to beat a team that you beat last year. You know, that's what it is. And get bowl eligible early and knock it off. Knock that monkey off the back before you even get into that second half. You know, strength of the schedule.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating schedule. I mean, I guess I just. That back half is going to be insane. I mean, Ohio State and USC, and first game against UCLA, I think is kind of a mess. But USC is obviously always good. Ohio State's just spent $25 million on their team, which is crazy. And then Wisconsin and Iowa, obviously, it's haven't beat them in a decade, but yeah, I mean, it's like that first half. We just have never in the last, beside the only year that's like sticking out to me is that Mike Riley year that he started 7-0. That was a total fluke, but it was a total fluke. But it was at least like the momentum was. You could see the guys like felt like they were winning and winning and winning, and we just have never done that. Didn't do it the entire Frost, and we didn't even really do it last year.
That 16 season was really interesting because we went 7-0 and we didn't know how good they were. And then in the 8th game, they go to Wisconsin. They lose in overtime at Camp Randall, where Ohio State went and lost in overtime that same year. And then Dave on the Redcast, Dave, we flew from Denver to Columbus, Ohio that next week. And we were talking, this is before Redcast started, and we were talking on the flight. And all of a sudden, other fans started sitting around us and we're having drinks and talking about the Husker game. And I was like, my response to them was, I didn't know how good we were after 7 games, but after that 8th one, this is where I feel like this is going to be a 4-quarter game against Ohio State. That's how much that loss at Wisconsin, left a really positive note on me. And, it shows how much I know. It wasn't a 4-quarter game. It wasn't a 4-play game. And, and then you hear all the talking heads that were like, well, we lost the game before it even started. You could see on the field during, pregame warmups, we were going to lose. Well, good Lord. We're a good looking team. The pipeline jerky. We've got a good looking group of guys, some big dudes, 6'10", 6'. We look good coming off the bus. That's not going to be an issue any game this season. Let's build some momentum in those first 7 games. And I don't see any crazy 62-3, even going to the horseshoe. So, but build that momentum up and see where it takes you from there.
Yeah. One. This is the last thing. I'll be respectful of your guys' time, but we've got 1,200 people that are listening live, so I don't want to let the people down. But totally, this is one's kind of digression, but I think it's a really interesting kind of like finishing thought. Did you guys hear any of this about the headsets? How or the quarterback's going to have a headset? Did you guys hear about this? So the new rule came through. Did you hear Rule talking about it all this week? It was he had a super interesting piece where he was talking about how everyone's like, oh, that's great. Their quarterback's going to have it. He's like, you guys don't understand the operational complexity that goes into this. This is kind of goes back to Honky and Jim, what you guys were talking about the operational structure of the business. He's like, you don't just put a headset in. It's like, if the quarterback goes out, the other quarterback has to have like the right headset in. And apparently there's only one defender's allowed to have it on the field. And if that defender's out of the game, how do you make sure only the right guy is in the game, or they're rotating guys in and out the way that Tony White does? He's like, you guys understand the complexity that goes into it and how much time we are spending right now making sure the right linebackers in the game. And on the punt team, we can't have the 2 guys that have the right helmet thing in at the same time. Like, it's all of this crazy stuff that you don't think about because you're just like, oh yeah, they can just radio it into the quarterback. But I think it comes back to, this kind of finishing where we started with, where I feel great about Rule is he's thinking about all these things. He rattled off 15 of these things. He's like, we're working on punt team. We got to make sure that the right guy's in at the right time with the right headset in. And what if he gets hurt? Who's the next guy that comes in? Who's the next guy that comes in? If that guy's hurt, how do we make sure we don't have the right 2 guys on at punt team? What about kickoff team? Like the right guy's the right headset on. It's April 24th, and he's thinking about 700 different things that might happen on the headset. That, again, we're talking about Frost a lot, and I love Frost. Everybody knows my deep love for Frost, but like he didn't want to think about any of that shit. Just like that guy wanted to think about, I just want to bomb the ball, and I just want to play offense. I don't want to think about special teams. I don't want to think about details or any of those things. That I guess that to me comes back to the culture of where we started this whole conversation, that operationally it feels like he's thinking through these things, at least verbally. Maybe he's just talking about it, but I don't know. I thought that's kind of an interesting way to finish up this podcast. What do you guys think about, those kind of final things as they're getting thrown in there and how they're handling them? Do you guys think they're handling them pretty well?
That kind of stressed me out just hearing that again. I was like, he talked about the recruitment manager. He's like, I don't know. He's a great recruitment manager, but I forget his name, Mark Terry or something. But I was like, how is that going to even happen? No, I think they're in good hands. I think that's I think their experience in NFL, this is where, 3 years in NFL as a head coach on the headsets is really going to be an advantage for us, at least in the interim, or until other teams figure it out as well. But I feel comfortable about that process, and it'll be interesting to see how they do it. It's interesting. They said it's not really an advantage on defense. We're not really seeing it working too well with calling the plays of the defense, but offensively, it certainly is an advantage for the the play caller to be able to do that. So
It's
Yeah,
crazy.
like,
You always hear with football, it's a game of inches, and some coaches will spend, hundreds of hours planning for games and all this. And at the end of the day, it usually comes down to just lining up right and doing some of the very basic things right. In 2021, the Michigan State loss with special teams, we don't have a coordinator, but we're punting to the wrong side of the field. We get a punt block against Iowa because we have the wrong-footed kicker, on the field with the wrong protection. It's so basic that it's almost laughable. And that's the kind of stuff. And so when we had Osborne on a few years ago and he talked about offensively, it was the preparation of just making sure that we're not going to call that play unless that guy knows how to call that play in practice, and quarterbacks are out there doing audibles and all these things. We're going to make sure that we know how to do the basics. And 9 times out of 10, you go back and you watch one of the offenses that we would have had back in the 90s, and we would have beat you before the play even started. When we go up against Florida and we go 5 wide, you could see before they even snapped the ball, we already had them misaligned. It's a line right, line up right. We're going to call this play. To your point there, Dave, we're taking this guy off the field. We better know who's the guy that's going to be coming on. They can do it. That's preparation. And it's just, if you don't do that, when you don't do those things right, that's when you lose football games. And Coach Rule, hopefully, last year I didn't see a lot of mistakes that caused us to lose games. Not that way, not dumb mistakes where we did some things wrong last year, but wasn't kicking to the wrong side of the field wrong.
Yeah.
So there was execution errors, and I think that's where recruiting and development can hopefully fix those execution errors.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, I think
Andrew, what do you think?
Well, I think it's definitely going to be a problem when Michigan hacks our FM channel or whatever we're talking about.
We don't play them. We don't play them.
We don't play them.
That's going to be a meltdown. They're definitely
the championship game, that's going to be tough against Michigan, man.
Yeah.
No, I actually think that this could not possibly be better timing with like 2 potential true freshman quarterbacks. I could see them I could see it being like to the point where it's like, hey Dylan, remember the play. This is what you do. It's just like walking them through. But in all honesty, I think that here's the play call, here's your read. This could be, it's huge for development and just giving him the confidence and giving him those little helpful cues and stuff on the spot that you might not otherwise be able to. So I've got a positive spin zone. This can only work in our favor. And
the rule, it goes until 15 seconds before on the clock, and then they turn it off so they can talk up until that point.
You can't dilly dally and wait till 16 seconds to get the play in.
Well, but you hear, that was another point that Rule made too. There, he was like, the big trick is everybody realized they would just switch formations. The defense would switch at the 15-second mark. So they would all just be they'd be completely still until 15 seconds. They'd watch the play clock. It'd get to 15. His headset shuts off. And then the entire D line shifts. The linebackers switch around, and then he's like, ugh. I think Hongi, that goes all the way back to your point of we will see, man. I think he clearly has the talent. Talking about Raiola, he's got the talent. He's unbelievably physically gifted. He's got all of the things that we want. But yeah, when there's 8 seconds left, and Ohio State has shifted from a 3-4 to a some dramatically different defense. He's got 9 guys blitzing, and it's screaming, and it's super loud. Does he have it?
80-yard bomb, baby.
80-yard bomb, baby.
When he has opportunities to have an open guy, like our quarterbacks had opportunities last year, you got to hit it. You got to help yourself out there. If you do that, your running game's going to benefit from it, and vice versa. The running game, we got to be able to. We can't have what happened against Iowa last year. You got to be able to run against some of these teams. Both of those things are going to benefit the quarterback there. Help yourself out, hit the plays that are open, and then we got to have some success with the run game there.
It sounds like Danny and Dylan had headsets in high school, according to James Coughlin. So thank you, James, for chiming in. So I think we're good. So I think we are officially back. All the way back. The boys are back.
I'm all for it. I'll allow it.
The boys are back. We're going to wrap this thing up and respectful of everybody's time. But, man, we got 1,300 folks who have joined us tonight. Thanks, everybody, for joining. This is a fantastic show. Spring game's coming up. It's on Saturday.
That's
Make sure you watch
Thanks
it.
for coming.
We're going to be tuning back in. Honky, Jim, thank you, boys.
Yeah.
GBR.
Go Big Red, fellas.
Big Red.
Thanks for joining us.
See ya.